What's going on, everybody? This is the blockchain backer bringing you the latest cryptocurrency news and analysis. And today it's a new week. And well, that means that we had a weekly candle close yesterday over here on the Bitcoin price chart at $65,505, closing the weekly candle above the 3.618 Fibonacci extension level. So only one left remaining to go for the weekly candles. We did actually hit $69,000 last week, but in today's video, we will take a peek primarily here at Bitcoin. We'll take a peek over at the altcoin market. And really, I ran a bunch of polls on Twitter yesterday to try to kind of gauge sentiment to see how the market was viewing what's going on with price action right now and what their belief systems are. Now, Twitter polls are not entirely accurate, right? There's a lot of elements that can completely skew the data, but we'll take a look at it anyway. And the thing I really wanted to do in this video is we're actually going to do a couple of different deep dives on different things. So I think this will be educational to anybody, no matter which direction they lean on the poll. If you lean heavily one way or heavily the other way, I'm just going to present data on here, and it's up to you to make your own decision, right? I'm not a financial advisor. I'm not an investment advisor. It's not investment advice, but I present all the data and all the arguments, and you can draw your own conclusion from it. Now, it's no secret that I think that the top of Bitcoin's about to come in. Whatever. We're in the last retreat. We're in the last Fibonacci extension level. That's clearly my view. It's okay to have a different view than me, but that's absolutely my view. Now, one of the problems with that and why people won't hear me out is they think that maybe I'm a bear and maybe that I'm just unfairly being mean to Bitcoin. But the reality is I've had this YouTube channel for over 2 years. I've done over 560 videos on this YouTube channel, and 540 of those videos were saying Bitcoin's going higher. And being here during the times of $5,000, $6,000, $8,000 saying we're going to 72,000, we're coming out to these price levels. So this is not something where I'm just kind of popping it up on you and saying, hey, I think the top's coming in. It's merely that I've been saying this is where I expect it to go, and now we're here. But that doesn't really matter. What I think doesn't really matter here. For the remainder of this video, I'm going to actually just present data to you, and I will let you make all your own assessments of the data. I'll try to keep my opinions out of it, and we'll just present the data. Over the weekend, I ran 3 different polls, and we're going to run through each one of these and just kind of look at the data of each of them. The first poll that I ran was, what comes next? Is Bitcoin going to $100,000 or is Bitcoin going to $20,000? The next poll I ran, if Bitcoin breaks out to $100,000 and above, will the altcoin surge with Bitcoin or crash with all the money flowing back into Bitcoin? And lastly, do you think Bitcoin will lose more than 80% of its US dollar value during the next bear market? Now, for some people, these questions are a little bit uncomfortable, and some people may not know the answers to it, and it may just be a complete guessing game. But for me, on my YouTube channel, it's always been that I'm trying to stay 2 steps ahead of the herd. I'm always trying to figure things out way before everybody else. While everybody's still working on trying to figure out what's going to happen for the next step, I've already come to my conviction on what the next step is. But I'm trying to be 2 steps ahead of that. And earlier in the morning, I posted the quote, when you're 1 step ahead of the crowd, you're a genius. And when you're 2 steps ahead, you're a crackpot. And that's kind of how I'm feeling right now. I do feel like I'm considered to be crazy. And I think a lot of misinterpretation is out there that thinks that I'm this negative Nancy on Bitcoin, but it's not true. It's just data. And it's just based on my experiences that I've had in this market and my experiences having this YouTube channel that I can see when the sentiment is swinging one way or the other, when we're in extreme greed, when we're in extreme fear, what price action is looking like that at that time, and what happens to the general herd and what their belief system is for pricing and what typically happens when that herd is all crowded into the same direction. For example, back in May, June, and July, the herd was crowded into believing that just admit we're in a bear market, prices are going to crash. And as prices get higher, as we could see, people believe that the price of Bitcoin is going to $100,000 now. But let's go ahead and dive into these polls and let's talk about these and take a look at the data and see what it says out there, okay? First things we have to address is that Twitter polls are not entirely accurate. They're skewed. There's a lot of problems that can come with Twitter polls. 1, it depends on what audience is answering it. 2, we have no idea if any bots come in here and they skew the data on their own as well. So we just kind of have to take it for face value of what it is and just assume that maybe it's relatively right. Now, one of the interesting things about this particular poll that I did right here is what comes next, Bitcoin 100,000 or Bitcoin 20,000. And as we can see right now, nearly 2/3 of people answered that Bitcoin's going to 100,000. When I posted this poll, within the first hour and the first 10,000 votes, it was 50-50, dead even. The thing is, at that time, it didn't have very many retweets. There's a lot of the people who follow me who were answering answering this poll. We're getting comments on there laughing, saying, wow, 50-50, in which I encourage people to go ahead and share it with their audiences, get it out there. Because the reality is a lot of content out there is pushing the idea that we're going to $200,000 or $300,000 for Bitcoin, and we've got to get it out of the echo chamber of me. If people follow me, there's a good chance that they subscribe to the same belief system that I do. A lot of people who think I'm a nut job or a crackpot, who think that the top can't come in at $70,000 to $80,000, are not going to listen to me. They just don't subscribe to me. I see the comments from those types of people and those types of content creators saying that I'm crazy. They don't follow me on Twitter, right? But if you're going to follow me, you're probably going to at least listen with an open ear to the arguments that I present. But some people have very closed off ears and they won't listen. So with my audience, it was at 50-50 for the first 10,000 votes. Once this thing started getting shared and started getting pushed past my audience, for all the votes remaining after that, it actually went to 71% believe we're going to $100,000 and 29% believe we're going to $20,000. So that's the problem with these polls. It depends on what audience is answering it, whether or not there's any bots going in there and messing with the data or not. And really, I think a lot of it just depends on, what group of people are being targeted with one of these polls. And so for my channel, obviously, we focus on the altcoins a whole lot more than we focus on Bitcoin. I'm not a big proponent of Bitcoin, so there's going to be a negative skew there, most likely in the data from my audience towards Bitcoin. Because if they're listening to me, then they're willing to hear the idea that the top of Bitcoin's coming in. Either way, the point of me doing this is because of the sentiment that we currently have in the market right now. Right now, we're in greed, extreme greed. And earlier today, I posted out on Twitter, can you find me any polls that were taking place back in June and July asking something similar? And there was this poll that was run by Benjamin Cohen. I don't follow Benjamin Cohen. I see that he does have a large subscriber. I don't know anything about him. I haven't followed if he has a YouTube channel, I haven't followed it. If he has tweets that he does all the time, I don't follow it. But from my understanding, he's a big proponent of Bitcoin, big believer in Bitcoin, and his audience believes in Bitcoin. And that may be an incorrect assessment, but that's from my belief. I believe he has over 300,000 followers. And what we could see is in June, that audience at that time did believe that we would see $20,000 Bitcoin again. So the highly believing in Bitcoin audience believed that we were going to see $20,000 again. And here's plan B. And again, I'm not here to talk about plan B at all. I'm here to talk about the poll results, and that his model says that we're going to $288,000 for Bitcoin. And he has, I believe, almost, how many does he have? 1.4 million followers only focused on Bitcoin. So it's a Bitcoin audience entirely with the idea that we're going to $288,000. And even in June 21st, 40% of respondents believe that Bitcoin would not hit $100,000. So why are those polls important? Because those polls were taken in here. These polls were taken when the market was in extreme fear, whereas my poll is being taken during a time period of greed. So what we do know is that the sentiment shift and the price expectations shifted between what happened then and what happened now. And I think that's an easy conclusion to come to. At that time, we all know there was tons of screaming, just admit it's a bear market. This thing's going to crash. It's going to crumble. As we get up higher now, everybody's expectations have changed. And now it's, hey, we're going for above $100,000. But these are important things to pay attention to. And it's important for me to never get caught up in those types of swings that happen in the emotional state of the retail investor herd. It's important for me to always be 2 steps of that herd. And that's why during May, June, and July, I had full conviction that we would recover. Because the structure said we were going to recover. I wasn't worried. I pushed through it, regardless of how negative it was. I was getting the most thumbs down on my videos. I was getting the most negative comments on my videos at that time by saying we would recover. Every day coming on here was almost a nightmare every day because of how much I was taking it on the chin. And I know all content creators were taking it on the chin that time if they remained in the bullish state. No question about it. Every one of them who are watching my channel right now, listening to the words coming out, they're shaking their heads saying, man, it was awful. But as we get up in here, everybody's trying to come up with everything that they can to ignore this and say that we're going to 100,000 or higher. And well, that's a generalization. Obviously, it's not everybody, but the majority. We have seen this exact same size super cycle with this exact same corrective structure happen before in Bitcoin. And this would be the 3rd time for this sized of a super cycle to happen in Bitcoin. So it is completely realistic for it to happen because it's the 3rd time it would have happened in Bitcoin's history since its inception in 2009. In addition, we could see that 4.23 4.236 extensions are realistic for what do happen for Bitcoin and how high they do go. Again, that is not me providing an opinion. That is me stating fact of what has happened with Bitcoin previously. But as we're here, we could see the sentiment is no, that's not going to happen. It's going to continue going. But what we do know is that most often than not, the retail herd, the retail group is wrong. And I think we all know that. And if you don't know that, you might find yourself trapped in it. But all of us who are objective, it doesn't matter what asset you're in, doesn't matter, you step outside of your box, forget about anything you're invested in right now. Everybody should know the retail herd is always led to the slaughterhouse. It always is. Whether or not they all believe we're in a bear market at the same time, or whether or not they all think we're going to the moon at the same time, if prices already swung in one direction already, typically the retail herd's going to be wrong. We know that because that's already happened 2 separate times this year. That happened when Bitcoin got there between, $45,000 and $64,000, all the laser eyes, diamond hands, all of the excitement, all of the euphoria. What happened? They were wrong. The price crashed 50%. Then at that time, what happened? Just admit it's a bear market. Bitcoin's not going to go to 100,000. Yes, Bitcoin will see $20,000 again. And then what happens? The price reverses and goes the opposite way. So wherever the retail group, the sentiment is together, that tends to be a warning sign that they're wrong, whether that's at bottoms or whether that's at tops. And that's not me just like picking on people or anything like that. That's just how this market works. The retail investor group as a collective whole does not think the prices are going to fall. So whether or not you have any belief system or not, it's important to take notice, I think, of what's happening with sentiment. We do know that in earlier this year, February, March, April, and May, that retail sentiment was euphoric with laser eyes and diamond hands, and they all had conviction that the prices were going to go up. That was the collective sentiment of the retail investor herd. They were wrong. Prices crumbled. Then, as the prices crumbled, the retail herd collective sentiment was bearish and that prices would fall further at the bottom. Both times, their sentiment was wrong at pivotal locations. And what we know right now is that Bitcoin is in new all-time highs, approaching the 4.236 extension, and the retail sentiment, once again, is that we're going to break through all of that and we're going to go on to higher prices. But we do know both big pivotal moments in this market in 2021, the collective opinion and sentiment of the retail investor was wrong. Take from it what you will. That's the data. Next up, we'll take a look at this one real quick. Do you think Bitcoin will lose more than 80% of its USD value during the next bear market? 2/3 said yes, 1/3 said no. Again, with this data, it didn't get shared as far as the other one did. How much of this is tied to specifically to seeing all the charts that I put out there? It's hard to know. We'll just address what the actual data says. Throughout the history of Bitcoin, Bitcoin has crashed more than 80% 4 times. It has crashed more than 70% 2 other times, once right in here and once right back in here. And this time back here, it crashed 93%. So many times Bitcoin has crashed over 80% when bear markets do set in. So for the 1/3 who said no, that won't happen, well, then that would be a belief that this time is different. And that tends to be the death blow to whoever has that belief. Bitcoin absolutely does crash 80% frequently. It does it every few years. And even just last year, it crashed 70%. And even this year, it crashed 55%. So 80% absolutely does happen when bull markets are over. The big question is, where's it going to do it from, right? If it's going to do it from right around here and it loses 80%, well, that gets you right back down to this price level right here. If it does it from a higher location, say it does from $100,000 and it crashes 80%, well, then that takes you right back to near the all-time high, back down there at $20,000 again. But if it goes higher, let's say it goes to 200,000 and it crashes 80% from there, it's going to get you back down to about 42,000. And hey, what if it goes all the way to $300,000 and then crashes 80% from there? Well, hey, we'll still see lower prices than what we see today. But either way, 80% crashes in Bitcoin do always come. We see them all the time. To believe it will never do it ever again would be a belief that this time is different. And now this is the last poll that we'll cover, and then I'll try to tie a lot of this stuff together. When the other poll that I asked is if Bitcoin breaks out to $100,000 and above, will the altcoins surge with Bitcoin or crash with all the money flowing back into Bitcoin? And we can see that about 60% said yes, the altcoins will surge with Bitcoin, and 40% said no, the altcoins will crash if Bitcoin breaks out to $100,000 and above. So a lot of that's going to assume on several things of what people think. And if they think the top of Bitcoin's coming in at $100,000 and this is all just a day trade to them, everybody's trying to dump all their Bitcoin at $100,000, or if they think it's really breaking up higher. But that's kind of irrelevant. The pooled data is kind of hard to assess there. But I think, it does appear that people do assume if Bitcoin breaks out and goes higher from where it's at, if it breaks through $100,000, if it just starts flying, the whole market is going to fly with it. So we'll assess this and see if that's a probability based on what has happened in previous market cycles. We know that we have enough data to be able to look back at 3 different altcoin seasons that took place in the previous bull runs. We have data from the top of the 2013 bull run that showed an alt season. We also have data right in here of a big giant alt season where everything took off together. So if you're unfamiliar with what this chart is, essentially what I'm doing is comparing the market caps of all of the top coins back in 2017. So I grabbed a bunch of stuff from the top 30 and put it in here. I didn't include all of them because, there's some stuff that just pump and dump, but names you should recognize: Litecoin, Ethereum, Dash, Zcash, IOTA, Monero, EOS, Stratus, Neo, Steam, Waves, Dogecoin, XRP. And we have the market caps of all of these different individual altcoins. And up here on the top, we have the Bitcoin price chart, or the market cap of Bitcoin. And we can see specific phases in which the altcoins did surge. And we can see that it happened at the top of the 2013 bull run. We can see that there was, for some reason, this big alt season where all the altcoins went up right here. And then we can see this additional phase right in here. Right when the top of Bitcoin came in, all of the altcoins surged up with that as well. So the argument here is that if Bitcoin breaks out and goes above $100,000 and it keeps on flying, the altcoins will fly with it. However, there's very specific phases of a Bitcoin bull run in which we have seen the altcoins take off in unison together, and they occur at the tops of Bitcoin bull runs. And then this example over here, we could see this occurred with the breakout into the new all-time high. So after Bitcoin got through its all-time high here, which after being in a prolonged bear market, it took off right in here. So if we assess where Bitcoin was at right at that time period, you can see that Bitcoin was right in here. And this is the argument that a lot of people do have right now, is that the phase that we're in for Bitcoin is that we're not in a problem scenario where this thing's going to top here, like what I'm talking about back in here that I keep showing that the top coming in here, but more so this is just a pit stop. This is going to break out, and that we're repeating something more along these lines, right? That it's going to have no problem getting through all of this. But I do want to show you, even in that scenario, right, we could see how it reaches out to these levels right in here. It gets up near the 4.236 extension. Bitcoin pulls back and continues to break out. But what happened in that time period for the altcoin market? You can see that the altcoins just went flat in here. They all, for the collective whole, didn't do much. Many of them just continuing to grind into the downward direction as Bitcoin continued breaking up. So if the argument is it's going to continue going, it's going to get through the 4.236 extension and keep going, well, look what happened with the altcoins during that time period. They did not follow during that time period as Bitcoin kept going up. It was not until Bitcoin's top came in that the altcoins ended up taking off. So we have, these 3 scenarios or 3 situations to draw back from: the top of the Bitcoin bull run, which happened twice, that led to alt seasons, and this time period of breaking out into the all-time high, reaching out to that 3.618 extension. Once it got beyond that 3.618 extension, the altcoins collectively went flat or did nothing that whole time until Bitcoin finally did reach to its top. So that would not support the idea that Bitcoin's going to get through here, go to 100,000, keep on cranking, and the altcoins are going to go with it. If that's the scenario of Bitcoin getting out and going and going and going, the altcoins historically will get pummeled during that time period. So the assessment here by the general retail investor collective sentiment is that if Bitcoin breaks out from here and keeps going to 100 and breaks up higher, that the altcoins will go with it. We don't have any historical data to show that's what happens. And what typically happens, if you have that type of scenario play out, what would you get? Media coverage about Bitcoin, excitement about Bitcoin. Oh no, why didn't I buy Bitcoin? And people just sell off everything and FOMO into stuff at the top, which is what they usually do. The charts show that's what would happen, and that's what has happened. And retail behavior shows that's what they do. They sell off everything and FOMO into one thing. So I'm doing my best not to include my opinions in here, but the data does not support what the general belief is right there. What the data supports is that there are alt seasons that can happen as the top of Bitcoin comes in, and there are alt seasons as Bitcoin can break out into a new all-time high after a multi-year bear market, not after a multi-month bear market like we've recently gone through and people want to call it a bear market. I don't call it a bear market because I've been through real bear markets, man. That was a bearish time period, but the data supports that the alt seasons occur at the top of Bitcoin bull runs and after a breakout of a multi-year bear market. We are well beyond that, right? This was the time period. The argument is that we're right in here, right? Put down those Fibonacci's again. The argument is, if we're going to go to that 300,000 price level or whatnot, is that we're right in here and we're getting ready for this moment in time, right? So this alt season time period is behind us, and that would present the argument that we're going into right in here, which means nothing happens with altcoins, and we're still waiting for the top of the Bitcoin bull run to come in much later. And then that's when the altcoins can take off. But the real main event of the show would be Bitcoin. So, to get a better understanding of where my mindset is at and why I don't think that Bitcoin's going to go much higher, I think the top of Bitcoin's coming in, and I do think that the altcoins are going to take off, is because of the fact that I think the Bitcoin top is coming in very soon. This is the third time that we've seen a super cycle for Bitcoin of this size. Ironically, even the whole 2018 through 2020 time period was a mirror of what happened during the last Bitcoin super cycle. Also, it does indicate that an 80% crash or more would be coming afterwards, and that as we go into this time period of Bitcoin's top happening here, it is a bullish time period for the altcoins. It is exciting for the altcoins. So for those who are hooting and hollering for the altcoin market, this should not be a situation of being worried about Bitcoin. I mean, we don't know what's going to happen, but we can look to the past and see what has happened before. And in this circumstance where we did have the top come in right here, it was alt season, baby. It was good. So it's a very positive thing for the altcoin market for the Bitcoin top to come in. It's potentially a negative thing for the altcoin market for Bitcoin to break out and to surge up to 200, 300,000. Does it mean that the altcoins will never take off? No, it doesn't. The history still shows that the altcoins would still take off in that scenario. It's just going to take longer. It's going to take waiting on Bitcoin to get all the way up to those higher prices. But it does not show that they would take off with Bitcoin in that scenario. However, in this scenario right here, the one that I have conviction on, I had conviction that we'd have a 50% crash from here. I had conviction that we would hold right here. And I have conviction the top of Bitcoin is coming in, and I have conviction that the altcoin market is going to have a good time soon. I'm always trying to stay 2 steps ahead. I am never ever trying to guess what it is 1 step ahead. I am always the crackpot because I've been in this market so long that I know what it's like to be with the herd, to be with the crowd, and to know what it feels like to get wrecked being with the crowd, because the crowd will always get wrecked. They will always believe the prices will go much higher, and they won't. And they will always believe the prices will go much lower, and they won't. And Bitcoin, unbelievably, has followed precisely what it has followed in the past. So to answer all of those poll questions for myself, do I think Bitcoin will go to 100,000 or 20,000 first? I think 20,000 is more likely than 100,000. I actually don't think we'll even hit $100,000 in this bull run. I think we will hit $20,000. Do I think the altcoins will surge if Bitcoin breaks out to $100,000 and above? No, I don't. I think the altcoin market would be very boring, very depressing if that did happen with Bitcoin. I think Bitcoin would be the main show of the event, and it would swallow a lot of the dominance in the market if that did happen. 3, do I think Bitcoin will have an 80% correction? Absolutely. No doubt about it. Or more. Probably more. But again, those are my opinions, and that's me answering the poll. But the main synopsis of what I present on my Twitter and what I present in my YouTube channel is all of this data. And I've taken into account everything, the $300,000 stuff, the $150,000 stuff. I even have my exit plans, formulated around what if I'm wrong, right? Sold 65% of my Bitcoin. I hold on to an amount, 35% just in case I'm wrong. I have very strong conviction I'm not wrong, but I am a human being and I'm willing to accept that I can be. But when I look at all the data and everything combined, I do not think Bitcoin's going to 300,000. $200,000, or even $100,000. I'm very strongly convicted that this is what is happening here, and the top is coming in between here, where we're already at, we're 69,000 and 80, 81, 82, somewhere in this range, and that $100,000 is absolutely not going to happen. Similar to what we saw with Doge, where everybody was hoping for $1 for Doge. Where did it top out? 72 cents. What is everybody going for Shiba Inu? 1 cent. It's very common for the general public to latch on to round numbers. 100,000, the big round number. I don't think it's going to happen. The data doesn't support it. Super cycles don't support it. Fibonacci extensions don't support it. They all support that the top of Bitcoin is coming in. But a lot of people interpret that as me being very negative on Bitcoin, and I'm not. It is just the data. It all says the top of Bitcoin's coming in, but it doesn't mean I've sold out my whole portfolio from cryptocurrency. All it means is I've shifted heavily into the altcoin market, because if the top of Bitcoin's coming in, then the altcoin market's going to fly. At least that's what has happened in each of the previous tops. So I'm not here to rain on the parade. I'm more of here to like hoot and holler and be like, yay, finally, the Bitcoin top's coming in. That means alt season's coming in. Yay. But the thing is, these things can get drawn out. These things can take a lot of time. As you guys know, I executed my exit plan on Bitcoin at $58,000. Back at this tip right here, back on February 22nd, excuse me, right back over here. And then it took 3 months for Bitcoin to roll over. And there was still a lot of hype and expectations and euphoria. And a lot of narrative still came out after that, right? We still had the Elon Musk stuff on Saturday Night Live. And so this process could take a while. And then, what happens is that enough time elapses that some type of narrative, some type of new drawing comes out. In the way I imagine it, right? So if we look back to how previous tops have come in, we end up having the top come in, an initial crash like this, then an ABC structure come in. But what would be really interesting about this, right, is if the altcoins are taking off into this, as we saw happen back in here in 2017, into the retracement level, there would still be a lot of doubt that the top of Bitcoin is in, because what a lot of people will do is point back to this one over here. And as you can see, Bitcoin did come in for a retracement right in here. And at that time, the altcoin market was taking off, right? So there's going to be a lot of confusion happening in the market, seeing that the altcoin market would be taking off into that moment, and everybody wishing and wondering, is Bitcoin going to break out like it did back in here? Because the altcoins were taking off into this moment, and then if the altcoins are taking off into this moment, all this wonder and all this FOMO to think that it's going to keep going up much higher. But I don't think it will. I think Bitcoin would actually crash after that, because in the end, this is my synopsis. But to just remember that the reason I'm excited about that is because of what has happened during those moments previously. And while everybody is hooting and hollering for a higher Bitcoin price, I hope I showed you something of what happens with the altcoin market if that were to actually play out. And that for those who are actually more interested in altcoins and interested in alt seasons, you actually are cheering for this more than you're cheering for this. And so, in summary, what comes next? The general public believes that we go to $100,000. We know that they were wrong with laser eyes and diamond hands. We also know that they were wrong when they said just admit it's a bear market. So, once again, the sentiment has shifted to the other side. If Bitcoin does break out above $100, the general public does believe that the altcoins would surge with it. The historical data shows us that in this scenario, it would not. The altcoins would stay still or go down if Bitcoin did do that. And here, there does seem to be a little bit more of an agreement that 80% crashes do come for Bitcoin. However, 1/3 of people do believe that it's just not even possible to happen. So I don't have any reference points to go back and look at to see, what has that been before. But still, 1/3 of people believe it cannot crash 80%, and that's quite a few people. So, all right, guys, that's going to wrap it up for this one. I thought it would be a good idea to take a look at the sentiment of the general public and see what they think, and then compare that to how this market has performed in the past. And we could see that there does tend to be quite a bit of misalignment in what people do believe, whether or not they think Bitcoin can crash 80% or not, whether or not they think the altcoins will pop off with Bitcoin if Bitcoin breaks out, or whether or not we're going to 100,000 or we're going to 20,000. There's a disagreement everywhere. But for me, you know my beliefs. This is how I am. This is how my channel will continue to remain. And that's because I've done a lot of studying of this market for a very long time. And this is just the assessment that I've made about this market. So I'm sticking with it. But otherwise, I'll go ahead and wrap it up. If you're looking for something to do, of course, you could check out my website over here, which is bcbacker.com. Gives you kind of a taste of the stuff that we do go through. I do compare a lot of that stuff that's happened in the past and deep dive into a lot of it. So let me run through this. This is a course that I put together where I deep dive into the previous Bitcoin bull runs, the different altcoin market cycles. I tie them all together to show how they've worked in the past. I talk a lot about Fibonacci's. I talk about my personal exit plans in here. I teach you how to set up your own charts and your own indicators within TradingView and CoinTrader Pro. And I talk about mathematics and percentages and why those are so important to me. Last week, I did add in here exit plan for Ethereum Part 4 final update and the blockchain backer exit plan Part 4 progress update. All of this is available to anybody enrolled in the course and anybody who newly enrolls in the course. And the most recent market update was added there on October 31st. And you can check out all of this educational content over here on bcbacker.com. You could follow me over here on Twitter at bcbacker, and I want to thank you so much for watching my channel. If you could, please like this video and give it a thumbs up. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe and hit the notification bell so you can be notified of when I create new content and when I go live. As always, this is not investment advice and I am not a financial advisor. But if you ever need a pick-me-up or a little bit of reassurance, just remember that the blockchain backers got your back. Have a good one.